Good afternoon, everybody. It is Angie Atkinson, and I'm here with the lovely and talented Dana Morningstar. Dana, welcome back.
Thank you so much for having me. It's good to be back.
Always my pleasure. And we are here today to talk to you about this article that that we found, and I find it rather interesting. It is written by, hey, everybody who's jumping into the chat. We're just going to, oh, wait a minute. Before I say all that, Dana and I do this stream every Tuesday. Usually we do it on this channel one week and then we alternate back to her channel and back and forth. So make sure you are subscribed to both of us and have your bell notification hit so that you can be notified when we go live. Okay, so the article was written by a guy named Glenn Sullivan. He is a Ph.D. He is a professor of psychology at the Virginia Military Institute and a clinical psychologist in Lexington. And the article is entitled, "Sorry, but your ex probably isn't a narcissist." And it's subtitled, "Being selfish doesn't necessarily mean you have a personality disorder." Okay, so far so good. The thing is that he starts off, he says, if you want to write an article that gets read by thousands of people, be sure to include some variant of narcissism in the title. It seems as there is a great hunger for information on NPD, what it is, how to identify it, how to coexist with someone who exhibits it, or how to go on after having been in a relationship with a narcissist. This great interest is curious given that NPD is a relatively rare condition. And he goes on to talk about the prevalence, and we know, he says it runs around 6 to 7% for men, 4 to 5% for women. However, I would like to point out that is the diagnosed population, which usually is what, Dana, people in hospitals, people in prison?
In prison.
Yeah, exactly.
People that go in for treatment, which narcissists notoriously don't.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then he says, but people, as Dana just said, people with NPD are not known for seeking help. In fact, if a patient were to tell me they were worried they might have NPD, I could be fairly certain that they didn't. We know all of that. Narcissists don't worry about being narcissists. He says to do so would imply the presence of empathy, etc. Okay, so we know all of that. Then he goes on to say that people with NPD are most likely to come to clinical attention in the context of treatment for some other mental disorder. It's almost like he's taken one of our videos and he's put them in his article, right?
Mm-hmm.
Talks about the treatment, talks about, which is of course, he says treatment is usually short-term. Remind them of their many strengths and past accomplishments. Show them some positive regard, even admiration, and their narcissistic defenses are quickly restored. Their mood symptoms resolve. Suddenly they wonder why they've been wasting their time, blah, blah, blah. And let's see here. Talks about it being a severe personality disorder, how it shares characteristics with ASPD and BPD. And it goes on and talks about what narcissists are, which we're not going to go into all that right now because we've talked that to death, and you could Google either one of our names along with what is narcissism and find out what we think it is. But then it comes down to, and he goes through all this, it's important to remember this is a disorder. And on the other hand, there are many, many, many more people who are simply selfish and mean than there are people who have NPD. He says this is an important distinction. If your ex-spouse was selfish and mean, it's okay to describe them that way and to not go reaching for a psychiatric explanation of their behavior. I wonder if our society has become so terrified of making value judgments that we resort to value-free psychiatric diagnosis instead. We won't dare say that Mozart is musically superior to Taylor Swift because that's just a matter of opinion, as opposed to an objective statement of truth. We won't say that our exes are selfish and mean because that sounds like a value judgment. So instead we say they have NPD. I'm not judging, they just meet all of the diagnostic criteria I found online. And he says there's a saying in psychiatric diagnosis, if you hear hoofbeats, think horses, not zebras. People who are selfish and mean are common like horses. People with NPD are relatively rare like zebras. There's a reason, blah, blah, blah. Okay. So, and he says, there's a reason Taylor Swift wrote Why You Gotta Be So Mean and not Why You Gotta Have Narcissistic Personality Disorder. Okay. Let's talk about it. Dana, thoughts?
My thoughts are, okay. I see what he's saying, and I do agree that
Yeah.
and actually his numbers of, anywhere from 4 to 7%
Mm,
men and, combined men and women, that's actually high. Uh, More recent numbers that I've read are closer to 3%. But again, you're talking about narcissists that are diagnosed,
mhm,
and you're talking also that go in for diagnosis, that are accurately diagnosed, which I think are few and far between. The
mhm.
vast majority of mental health clinicians that I have come across, really, it's not easy to make a diagnosis,
Right.
because you're only seeing a snapshot of that person. It takes time.
Yep.
And when you have, uh, very manipulative people, they're not, like, they're not, so obvious to spot a lot of the time. Sometimes they are. Sometimes they walk in the room and within, 20 minutes, you're like, oh, they're just insufferable.
Right.
And you can see it clearly. But the more convincing ones, it takes time. And I think a lot of uh, women are not diagnosed accurately with narcissistic personality disorder. Regardless, if a person's behavior is so outrageous that it's traumatizing to other people, if it's so disruptive, if it's so um, rigid and persistent and just so disruptive to their life, whether or not they realize it or not, that's what we're calling, that's kind of the criteria for a personality disorder. And each personality disorder has different criteria, which a person has to have, a handful in order
Yeah.
for it to be fit into each one. But frankly, I would say the vast majority of the time when people are dealing with abuse, it's we're not even talking about narcissists. We're talking about antisocial personality disorder.
True. Yeah.
So I think you could even escalate that and say, yeah, not all of them are grandiose or whatever, that fit the kind of more common criteria for narcissists, but a lot of them would fall into antisocial personality disorder.
Yeah.
And a lot of mental health clinicians are not comfortable diagnosing that because they're not familiar with it. And they tend to think, oh, it's, unless this person is, you know, very obviously antisocial, like they come in, they've got like an axe to grind with society,
Mhm.
they're just defiant, they're angry. Those are kind of like the slow pitches, but by and large a lot of them don't come in like that. They'll come
Right.
in charming, seeming like compassionate, they seem to
Mhm.
show empathy. It's very difficult to spot this. So frankly, I think articles like this are kind of missing the bigger picture, which is what the person is trying to describe. And the reason people tend to grab on to narcissistic personality disorder or antisocial personality disorder is because it captures what they're experiencing. And so they're like, oh my God, this is it. I have been fumbling in the dark for
Mhm.
years or decades, not knowing if it was me or them or what. And this matches them to a T.
Yep.
And then they go in to see a mental health professional who's very dismissive
Mhm.
and, oh, well, it's probably not that, and very invalidating. And it's re-victimizing. So I think it's
Absolutely.
important for both survivors and mental health clinicians to put the terminology aside in a very respectful way and try to better understand what is this person telling me that's going on. But then again, that's the other challenge, is because a lot of mental health clinicians are not even familiar with emotional or psychological abuse.
That's right. And,
So
and you're
like,
you're you're on point 100%. In fact, I've had several, I mean, upward close to 10 different clients over the years who have been mental health professionals, psychologists and
yeah.
psychiatrists, and a couple social workers, you know, and and they come to me because they hear me talking about this and they don't know. And they've told me.
Mhm.
I've even got one of them on video on my channel saying, they don't teach you this in school. They don't.
Yeah.
And so that is why we're doing what we're doing. And but also on the same note, I think that his goal, as I saw E-Rock mention, uh, like if this is an article that is in the newspaper accessible by the general public, there are truths about narcissism that need to be spoken about. It's like it's almost encouraging people to calm down, and that's exactly what I think. It's a matter of being able to it. Look, I never diagnose anyone. Dana doesn't diagnose people. We are here because we are trying to help people understand this is what a toxic relationship looks like, right? It's not really about NPD or ASPD or any of it. It's really about how do you feel in that relationship? And what you know for sure is that if you're dealing with someone who is toxic, you're dealing with someone we call a toxic narcissist. We're talking about someone who doesn't have empathy and who treats you like they don't have empathy, who treats you like you don't matter, etc. And so my fear is that with this type of article out there, it's invalidating, like I think you mentioned, Dana, to a lot of people because they feel like exactly what you said. I mean, I can't really even exactly what you said because they're looking at the exactly what I found when I figured out NPD was a thing, and exactly maybe for the same for you, where you go, oh my gosh, this is what I've been dealing with. This is validating to me because now I know maybe it's not me. This is a real thing. And I think it's just so important, as even the author noted, to recognize the largest, probably 90, 95, 99% of people are not diagnosed when they do have it. So we're only talking about people who have been diagnosed in that percentage that he pointed out. So I yeah, and Bell says, I'm astonished at the lack of knowledge among the therapeutic community about what this really is and how to help clients. And that's the truth. Yeah,
Yeah,
and
I think to underline that last part of how to really help clients,
mhm,
because and I know, Angie, this is exactly what you were just talking about.
mhm,
We encounter this day in and day out where um, people, they do get so hung up on terminology. And I get it. I totally get it. I was the same way, because once you have a word that describes your experience,
mhm,
you hold on to that and you're thinking, oh, if I can just explain to somebody what happened, then they'll have clarity too, and we can move forward. But then
mhm.
it's like it's even more dismissed and invalidated because the kind of mental health community is like, oh well, who are you to, they're very dismissive. Well, you don't
Right.
know, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
And it wasn't until I started my master's degree in counseling, and because I have an extensive background in psychiatric nursing,
Mhm.
working with mental disorders and personality disorders,
Yeah.
or mental illness and personality disorders. And that was when I realized I wanted to get my master's in counseling and move forward with this. And I just have been it's shocking the lack of accurate information that's out there.
Right.
So but I think to go back to really supporting clients, people that are searching for answers and they're searching for healing, because that is the bigger part of this is um, understanding like what is nourishing for you and what is toxic for you, and reclaiming that balance, understanding of yourself and your life.
Mhm.
That's kind of the gift in all of this, and getting rid of all of this toxic programming and all. There's so many different ways a person can get tangled up and off track,
Mhm.
um, and it's really unfortunate that healing is so difficult. Finding clarity is so difficult when healing itself is so difficult. You would hope that you go to a professional thinking that they'll have answers instead of adding more confusion, or worse, doing more damage.
Yeah, and I see, and I'm sure you've seen it too, Dan. So many people, exactly what you were saying, get victim blamed, get pushed aside, get told, don't focus on them, focus on this, and focus, and you should focus on yourself, absolutely. But when you have spent years, months, whatever, being minimized, being gaslighted, being just
Yeah.
driven insane, you've got to give. I think when therapists just shut you down and they say no, that's not it, and think about something else, focus on something else. This is a problem in our society. I really think so. Um,
I just wanted to touch on that briefly. That was,
mhm,
man, my father passed away on Thanksgiving.
mhm,
And one of the things that I've really realized in all of the grief that's surrounding that is it's really underscored for me how important it is to just hold space for people and to not try to fix them or push them forward or any of that. And that's a lot of the kind of therapeutic community does that. So it's sort
Yeah.
of like you get somebody in who is grieving. They've been traumatized. And it very quickly it's sort of like, okay, we're going to come up with a few goals that you have for therapy, and then we're going to create this treatment plan, and then we're going to move you forward. And this person's really pushed into, well, you got to focus on yourself, and that was the past, this is the present. And um that can really be incredibly damaging, because it's a big part in healing of just verbalizing and vocalizing how you're feeling. And
Yeah.
I think for a lot of um, mental health people, and I think life coaches, anybody that doesn't have who hasn't lived this, it's very, we kind of feel unproductive. Like, I want to help you, so I want you to hurry up and feel better,
Right.
right? And it's hard to slow down and just be like, you know what, I'll just sit here with you.
Exactly. You're so right. And you know what? On that same note, I think one of the things that the majority of my clients find comfort in is that exactly, you know, I don't push them. I don't, rush them,
Mhm.
and I let them go at their own pace, but also I validate them. Yeah, I understand how you feel. And here's the thing. Okay, regardless of whatever statistics are out there, regardless of what label you want to put on this, we all feel each other on a deep level because we can look at our experiences and we can draw parallels,
Mhm.
to the types of manipulation. It's almost like a playbook. And if this is not a real thing, why are they all alike? Why do we have so much evidence that it is? You know, like Lauren said, she said, I've seen so many people overuse the term narcissist, and yet here I am witnessing my ex being everything and fitting every little bit of criteria. That's what it all comes down to, is that so many of us can look at that criteria and look at these types of manipulation and these examples of this type of manipulation and relate to that. So I feel like I don't care if you don't want to put a label on it. Call it whatever you want. Call it Bob. I don't care. But coming up with, you know, it wouldn't be we so many thousands. I mean, I think on my channel there's 120,000 subscribers right now and change. And you can't look at that and go, it's not real. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because so many people, I can't tell you how many people, Dana, have said, I'm sure you've heard the same thing. How many people have said things like, are you looking at my kitchen window? How do you know what they said
Mhm.
to me? How did this, you know what I'm saying? So I feel like that's what I feel like. What are your thoughts? Anything on that?
Oh, I agree. I think right now we're at this place in understanding,
Mhm.
um, where there's this big kind of, snag with terminology. And that's been the big divide between kind of the mental health community and survivors. And, um, there just need there's a lot of awareness that needs to be done, and just validation
Yeah.
to be given. So,
Yeah. And as we're sitting here talking about this topic, and you and I have been talking about this topic for years, now there are all these new people jumping on YouTube, including people in that community who suddenly are saying exactly what we're saying. I'm just saying. Okay. All I'm going to say.
uh,
Anyway, in fact, PGTT says the narcissistic PhD, right? About the article. I totally, maybe that's the issue. Maybe he's offended by that. I don't know. But either way, interesting.
well,
Okay.
what also kind of chaps me about articles like that is it really just, again, I get where he's coming from, but at the same time, the people that are saying, "But my ex is such a narcissist," oftentimes they're not saying, "Oh, this person's just really selfish," and, "Oh, they just take a lot of selfies."
Exactly. Because
It's so
that's
much more than that.
so much more.
I
And
mean, that's like calling cancer inconvenient.
I mean,
Like, it's
yes.
so minimizing, like, no, actually, it's a little bit more than just inconvenient, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Psychological abuse
it's
on
the
a deep, profound
damage,
level.
the
Yeah.
profound damage that's
Mhm.
done to people when you have a person who is so entitled and self-absorbed, and it's all about them. It just sucks the life out of everybody around them, because you're
Yep.
not going to get validated. You're not going to get your needs met. You're going to be chronically invalidated and shamed and blamed and put down. And
Mhm.
that doesn't just end when the relationship ends. There's a tremendous amount of rebuilding that needs to happen. I mean, it's a journey. And
Absolutely.
that's what really frustrates me is I feel like the mental health community isn't understanding what people are saying. If
Hmm.
somebody says to you, man, my ex, this person in my life, man, they're a complete psycho or a psychopath or sociopath or narcissist, it's important to dig deeper. Okay, why do you say that? Instead of arguing about terminology. Because
Right.
generally, what I found, most people, when they use those terms, they're right. They're
Yeah,
describing narcissistic, sociopathic, psychopathic behavior.
exactly.
We don't need to have like a full diagnosis on the person, but we can accurately describe the behavior. If they're cutting your brake lines and threatening you and, doing all kinds of horrible things. Yeah. Like that's narcissistic or sociopathic or psychopathic behavior. Absolutely.
100%.
You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. And this is the thing is that, oh, somebody, wait, who was it? Oh, Brittany said Romani would say mean people are narcissistic. And as far as I know, she's Dr. Romani. So she's legit, apparently. Um, you know, and that was kind of right back around to what I said earlier about all of these people jumping on who claim to be doctors and professionals of different levels saying exactly what we say. So, anyway, sorry, I didn't mean to get off track there, but E-Rock said, I'm having a very irritated, annoyed reaction to this article, and and Jen agreed, as did several others. Anyway, sorry, I didn't. Do we want to jump into the chat? Are we
Sure.
still
Yeah. I'm scrolling through it.
okay? Do you got
Yeah.
something for us?
As we speak. Oh boy. Klaza says toxic personalities will minimize and dismiss other people's feelings.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, I agree. And again, whether we're talking about a person's full personality or if it's one-time behavior, minimizing and dismissing other people's feelings, that's still a problem,
Yes.
kind of by whatever name we want to call it. And so I think that's important here, is to look to for all of us to make sure that we're learning the bigger lesson of that. And um, you know, because it is important for people feel how they feel.
Yeah.
And just because we might not agree or just because they don't agree doesn't make it any less valid.
Hmm.
Um, you know,
Yeah. Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that we tend to already do as people who have experienced this type of abuse is we already tend to want to minimize our feelings and thoughts anyway because it's been done to us. So when someone, in a position like a therapist who is there to help us does that for us, and no, that's not it. That's why I tell people, don't ever say to a therapist that you think you're dealing with a narcissist, because a therapist,
Yeah.
especially one who doesn't understand narcissism, is going to flip on you and try to convince you that that's not accurate, which is why I tell people, when you go to a therapist, talk about, you know possibly emotional abuse or things, of that nature, because it's more effective to say something like even saying psychological abuse is going to make them have a, ding, they don't know what they're talking about. So not
Yep.
using terms that sound like you've been Googling, is important to get treatment. But again, if you're dealing with someone who doesn't understand narcissists, a narcissist could walk into their office and fool them, you know. And honestly, some of them are so charming, they could fool almost anyone until they dig into the truth of who they are.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, Crystal says, that's all fine, but my soon to be ex is actually documented and bailed on counseling shortly after being exposed, and exposed in my presence as well. Right. And PGTT says, I have no issue diagnosing others with NPD, even though I don't have a university degree. But what I do have is concrete life experience. Yeah. See, I don't diagnose because I'm not qualified to do that. And I wouldn't do that because I don't want to do anything I'm not qualified to do legally. You know what I'm saying? With that being said, I can usually guess if a person, I like to say toxic narcissist instead of NPD most of the time, because I don't care. Again, the label is irrelevant, but if somebody tells me this is what I'm dealing with, I might say, well, I'm not diagnosing that person, but from what you're telling me, it sounds like you're dealing with a toxic narcissist. Because to me, a toxic narcissist is that person who is not showing empathy, who is treating people from that perspective, acting from that perspective. So if you have no empathy or very little empathy, and you treat the world like you have no empathy, then you treat the world badly. And it seems like the closer to you that person is in your circle of people, the worse you treat that person when you are a toxic narcissist. But regardless of label, the issue is how do you I, how do you survive it? How do you get through it? And that is the only reason I ever talk about NPD or the symptoms of it, so that people can identify with what they're going what they're dealing with. I don't know if I just got off topic there, but that's
Yeah, no, no, you're right. I mean, it's validating for people to hear, yeah, what you're dealing with, that sounds really toxic,
yeah,
or that's incredibly narcissistic,
right.
or that's hurtful.
Yes.
Um, Chrissy asks here in the chat, why do narcissists accuse you of being the narcissist?
Mm.
And I just wanted to add a lot of it. Or do you want to take this, Angie?
Well, all I would say about that is that it's projection, and it's also deflection at the same time, because if they figure if they can, first of all, they're so self-focused that they can't imagine they don't have empathy, and they don't understand why you're not bending over backward to meet their every need. But secondly, it's really just about they don't see themselves clearly and they are projecting and deflecting. I think there's more to it. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think also it's important to realize that you're dealing with a person with a really skewed sense of boundaries.
Yes.
You're basically dealing, it's a one-way street with a person who's more on that narcissistic side of the spectrum. So that is a huge level of entitlement. So it's basically do as I say, don't do as I do. And so in their mind, they're entitled to loyalty, honesty, you know, all of these things, but you're not. No one else is. So
Right.
whenever anybody else sets boundaries with them, they're outraged. How dare you not forgive me? How
Yes.
dare you not unquestioningly give me money or assume that I'm lying or do all of these things? Your reality should be what I tell you.
Yeah.
Right? So you're dealing with a very immature person.
Right.
It's like it's like a small child. And so when you realize this person has no concept of appropriate boundaries or reasonable behavior or kind of that give and take that
Mhm.
needs to happen in relationships, it's they want their way all of the time, and they think that you're mean and cruel if you don't give it to them.
Yeah.
And they'll put up all kinds of reasons as to why, oh, you caught me cheating on you for the 10th time. Oh, well, I guess you're perfect, right? I can't live up to, you've never made a mistake. Or
Or
they
how dare
always,
you look at my phone? I'm
yeah,
leaving you.
right, that's a better one. Yeah,
Yeah.
I guess I can't trust you either.
Right.
Right, like you looked at my phone, so therefore we're both even, therefore my cheating was okay, therefore actually you're the problem.
Right. You don't
um
trust me.
yeah,
I always find that funny when you don't, anyway, they're caught
yeah, I
cheating and
mean,
you
it's
don't
just
trust them.
and they just grab at straws.
Yeah.
Well, you catch them, they're flirting with other, you see them on their phone, they're like sexting with other people, and then
Yeah.
they say, oh, well, you still talk to your, ex-wife or ex-husband, and you're like, yeah, about the kids.
Right.
Like, I'm not sexting this person. Oh, well, how
Exactly.
do I know? And then all of a sudden now your things are spun around, and now you're trying to defend yourself, and then you leave this argument apologizing and hoping that you can do better, and you're just kind of scratching your head wondering, how did this get here?
Yes. I cannot tell you how many times I went through not exactly that, but where I would come to them with a genuine, legitimate concern or feeling about something that I need to talk about. I need to get this figured out, and walk away feeling like, walk away apologizing and begging them to, okay, here's an example. So my ex, he would want to go out to the bars and do all the bar things. And I would not feel comfortable with that. We had a little baby and whatever I wanted. I don't know. I didn't want him to go to the bars. And so he would he would basically, when I would come to him and say, "Look, I just wish you wouldn't go to the bar tonight. Could you just stay home and be with us, blah, 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 whatever." And by the time he got done with me, I was begging him to go to the bar. "I'm so sorry. Please just go to the bar. Please. I'm sorry. I'll never do it." You know what I mean? Like, oh, God, I'm disgusted when I think about how I allowed myself to be manipulated, but you don't see it coming. It's like a Mack truck, you know, that comes up in the dark and hits you in the head, and then you're begging exactly what you said. You're apologizing for something that, maybe they went to the bar 2 weeks ago and they didn't come home for, all night, and you were real upset about it. So you don't want him to go this time. You know, yeah, I experienced that. Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, um,
Yep.
let's see. So I have one from E-Rock saying, "My understanding is that if you," this is not a question, it's a statement. "My understanding is that if you were going for a regular psychology degree, the cluster B personalities are in one class within one semester, 4 years of school." I think that's accurate. And I really don't believe that they dig into it. Oh, and E-Rock says that class is called abnormal psychology. Hmm. Yeah, I think that's probably accurate. Um, yeah,
And frankly, not even that. I mean,
right.
you have a diagnosis class that you take, and sometimes it's either a semester or 2 semesters, but that's kind of the foundation of, you have like a practicum and an internship and people
Sure.
reviewing your notes and these kinds of things, but diagnosis is very subjective. And it's, again, it takes time and it's kind of difficult
Yeah.
to assess right away. But the abnormal psychology, ironically, oftentimes isn't. Um, um, it's isn't necessarily cluster B stuff. I mean, it can be like schizoaffective. It can be, um, uh, dependent personality disorder. It can be somatic
Mm,
um, disorders. I mean, it's just there's a range, so it covers quite a bit. It's not the in-depth thing that, but here's the thing is because mental health professionals are people too,
mhm.
and this is just one of the great myths that unfortunately gets passed down is this idea we all tend to think that we could see a dangerous person coming.
Right. I did.
And
Yeah,
yeah, we all do. And I think we almost need to feel that way in order for us to sleep at night, or we would become completely neurotic.
that's
You
right.
know? So, but it's terrifying when you realize that your map of the world about who's safe and who's dangerous, when you realize that isn't accurate.
Oh my
And
gosh.
that's a big part of the problem with PTSD and CPTSD and overcoming that I think a lot of mental health professionals don't realize is that person needs to create a new map of
Yeah,
how to stay safe. And
right.
a lot of times that the focus is on kind of again like the low hanging fruit. Well, if this
Mm,
person, is cussing at you or threatening you or, looks dangerous, they're standing in a corner, twirling their mustache kind of a thing,
yeah,
you know, but lots of dangerous, you've got the Bill Cosbys of the world, you've got
mm,
the Epsteins of the world,
yeah,
you people that they don't fit that stereotype.
yeah.
And um
I was heartbroken when I heard about Bill Cosby, I can't
oh,
lie.
me too.
Yeah.
Me too. Heartbroken and disgusted and just
Mhm.
horrified. And I think that's why a lot of this stuff keeps going on. And because I mean, I've seen it. I can't even tell you how many meetings I've been in where we even have a case file on somebody and it's a slam dunk. Like this person, if this is an antisocial personality disorder, then I don't know what is.
Right.
And you still get mental health clinicians that treat this person like, oh, this is just a normal, decent person who's had kind of who just needs more love,
Right.
basically. And that might, but really that's not it. Like this person's incredibly dangerous and you just need to have your guard up and keep healthy boundaries.
Yeah,
But just
absolutely.
because they say, they seem to have empathy, they say all the right things, doesn't mean that they really feel that, like they're manipulative. I don't, it just reminds me so much of that movie that came out, what was it, like 7 years ago or so, like The Invention of Lying.
Oh yeah, I just watched that recently.
Did
Oh
you?
my
Yeah.
gosh.
And
Yes.
this one guy gets it. He's like, nobody else is aware of lying or liars.
Yeah, or
And
the
he,
possibility of it.
the
Yeah.
possibility of it. And like
Yeah.
he does, and he's like, oh my God, this is so crazy. It's kind of the same thing. Like other normal, decent people really have a hard time understanding behavior that's not normal and decent.
That's great example. That's exactly right. Yeah. I wish I would have thought of it. That was a good one. Yeah. And sapphire steel adds, unfortunately, most people don't know what a narcissist is until one has destroyed you. Then you have to be lucky enough to find a name for it. Harder still is finding a therapist who knows what they're dealing with. And 100%. I totally agree. Yeah.
Yeah.
Keating Simmons says, yeah, YouTube is so much cheaper than therapy. True. But we are not therapists. We are not here to give you therapy, blah, blah, blah. But we are here to support you. Let me get my disclaimer up really quick. Okay. Anyway,
Uh,
do you have
yes, here's a question from Penny who says,
a,
what if they're lying to Child Protective Services to make you look like an unfit mother? Uh,
been there?
yeah, I would just have all of your ducks in a row
Mhm.
and be aware that you're being watched. And so whatever you say or do will be used against you.
Yeah.
So make sure to say and do appropriate things and try not to slip.
All true. Yeah, my mother did it to me. I've written about it on my website, queenbeing.com/story, if you want to check that out. But it was done to me, and it's horrifying and upsetting. But yeah, exactly what Dana says. Have everything, make sure your house is clean. Make sure you're going to the doctor when you're supposed to. Make sure that all your utilities are taken care of, that your food in the house, your kids have clean clothes to wear, all that stuff, and you'll be fine.
Yeah,
Just,
basically just be a good, responsible parent.
yeah,
And, if something happens where, your kid needs medical care, just make sure that you're documenting things.
everything.
So
Yeah.
if they have a toothache, that you're documenting, okay, I called the dentist, there's a 3-day wait,
Hmm.
but I have a call in,
Yeah.
so that they can't say, oh, you're just, letting this stuff slide. So, if it's cold out, making sure that they have a jacket. If they don't have a jacket, then having some sort of explanation as to, they left it in the car
Right.
and that you were turning around to go drop it off again,
Right.
something like that.
Absolutely. And on the same note, making sure that, depending on how old your kids are, my kids were like 1, 5, and whatever, 11, I think, when this happened, or something around those ages. Excuse me. Now they're older, but the 1-year old is now my 12-year old. So, but when this happened, to me, it was devastating, and it was also shocking because it was my own mother and brother who were involved. But what Dana's saying is accurate. They couldn't find any problems. They came in my house. They saw all the things. I stayed involved with school. That's an important thing to do. Stay involved with school. Make sure you're communicating with teachers as appropriate, not excessively. you know, and like Dana said, right, you make sure you're documenting. Okay, so I called the dentist on this day. I called the doctor. Whatever you have to do. I took them to urgent care. Whatever. Just get your ducks in a row, and they can't do anything. The CPS people came to my home. They walked through my house. I didn't even know this was going to happen, but I was actually being a decent parent. So thankfully, and so they went through all my stuff. They looked at my pantry, they looked at my fridge, my freezer, they checked the drawers in our bedrooms, all the
Wow.
things. Yeah. And it was fine. She was like, I think this is a case of a revenge call, which apparently is not uncommon.
Yes, it's actually
So
very common.
yeah. So
Yeah.
know that, and that might help you to just make sure your ducks are in a row, and know that they are familiar with revenge calls. So yeah. Um, okay. Now, hi Damien. Now Crystal brings up. She says, when dealing with a covert, it is a completely different situation, one that the definition of narcissism doesn't really capture fully, and that's accurate. Coverts are different, but still toxic. Yes. Um, I'm trying to see for the next question here. Oh, this is not a question, but a comment, but I'm just going to share it. I think it's valuable. E-Rock says, calling it cluster B is not as widely known, perhaps. Jackson McKenzie's Whole Again is great. He addresses the cluster B abuse survivor apart from all other personality disorders and false selves. So that's Jackson McKenzie's Whole Again, if anybody's interested in that. Because Jackson McKenzie wrote Psychopath Free, right?
Mhm.
And I have that in my library as well. Shirley said, awareness is key. Yes, indeed. Oh, Elizabeth says they have an A to Z playbook. I mentioned playbook earlier. She said, I don't use the term loosely. I'm so serious about it. You're so right. Do you have a question for us? Because I'm getting a lot of comments and not a lot of questions.
I'm scrolling through here.
All right, let's see.
Uh,
Go ahead.
oh no, sorry, still
Okay.
looking.
All right. I'll just keep commenting until
Okay.
Keating says they have a harem garage of fuel or supply. I totally agree. Old supply and new supply, generally they have a backup before they drain you. And that is the truth. They do. They say a narcissistic harem, and it's not, look, it's not always about, intimate acts with each person, not on the level of intimacy. I'm not allowed to say that other word on YouTube anymore. Um, but that it's their mom, sometimes it's their brother, it's their neighbor, it's their maid or whatever. They have a circle of people who cater to them, and if one of them isn't giving it to them the way they want, they go to the next one. That's absolutely true. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. uh, I guess we said something that my three loves liked because we were told light bulb moment. Thank you. You put it into the words I've been searching for to describe this.
Mm. Yeah, and here's a question from Just Be Real. It says, "Do you still need to go no contact if the narcissist is facing a terminal illness?"
I mean, you still need to. I mean, I guess you never need to, but if you're dealing with somebody who's facing a terminal illness and you've actually seen the paperwork that says it's real because, or attended the doctor's appointment and heard with your own ears that it's real, then you have a choice to make. But personally, I don't think that a terminal illness excuses abuse. And so I don't think that you would be wrong to walk away if you chose to do that. But I would tell you that if you think you can't live with yourself if you do that, make your choice. I think it's a personal choice. And I think it also depends on the relationship with the person. And again, whether or not, I hate to say it, but so many narcissists and so many people, I have talked to several people who've told me that, number one, I've heard the cancer thing. A lot of people say that they have cancer, they don't, and other various terminal diseases. So I would definitely check on the diagnosis and make sure it's legit first. If you know it's legit, my personal opinion is, are we talking about 6 years? Or are we talking about 6 days? Maybe if it's 6 days or even 6 months, I could see if you really feel that you want to take care of that person after they abused you for your whole life. Personally, I don't know that I would be that person, but I also don't know that I would walk away if I was still in it when they were diagnosed and I knew that they only had a little short time. It's hard to say. Dana, thoughts?
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, it's just all about having healthy boundaries
Yeah.
with everybody all of the time. And especially, it's okay and appropriate to have healthy boundaries with people that you know are dangerous and destructive, that are abusive to you. And I think a lot of people, when there's terminal illness involved, well, like Angie was saying, a lot of the times they say that because it's a way of getting you to call them back. Oh, I think I have cancer. I just got back from the cancer is a big one. I just got back from my doctor. They think the cancer's back or this, that, and the other. And then everybody's like, oh, no, no, no. Oh, I'm
Mhm.
terrible. Poor you. All this attention. And then the reality is none of that's even real.
Right.
So yeah, I just would be hesitant. And, my thing is when somebody's been really awful to you, you don't need to stand around and be their punching bag. So that's the bed that they made. If they chose to be abusive for years and years and years, now all of a sudden they're terminally ill, they need to go contact other people that are going to be in their support system, not their former targets of abuse. And if they don't have anybody, then they need to talk to the social worker. They need to talk to their doctor
Mhm.
and talk to hospice that can provide them with a social worker.
Hmm.
that can be there to meet their needs. But I see so many people that are like, oh my goodness, assuming, let's just say, assuming that they truly are terminally ill, that drop everything. And they're like, okay, well, yes, my mother really does have stage 4 cancer. So I'm going to drop everything. I'm going to move across the state. I'm going to be there for her. Um, she's going to live with me. I'm going to cook and clean and do all of these things. And then they just wear themselves out. And then they're getting abused the whole time.
Right.
So
Yeah.
it's
It's exhausting. Yeah.
healthy boundaries, healthy boundaries.
Yeah. Now, I'm not sure of Violet Loudmute here. I'm not sure of her perspective, but I'm guessing she is not someone who has dealt with a toxic narcissist because, and maybe I'm misunderstanding her. So please, everyone, Violet, let me know if I'm misunderstanding you. But Violet says, I think that survivors of narcissism see everything from an emotional perspective and don't have a total grasp of reality. So I'm going to say this. Um, I don't know what the purpose of that was, but I think this. I think that yes, of course, we're going to see things from an emotional perspective when we're in the middle of it. But we're not talking about survivors of narcissism so much as we're talking about survivors of narcissistic abuse, psychological and emotional abuse, sometimes physical, depending on the situation, but mostly psychological and emotional. So I would disagree with you. I think sometimes, yes, sometimes we do feel like we're out of touch with reality, but also when someone not having a total grasp of reality is one way that narcissists um, claim their victims are broken. You don't have a grasp of reality, they tell us. You're crazy, they tell us. This to me feels a little bit like a gaslighting comment, and I'm not trying to be rude or disrespectful when I say that, but I feel like maybe I'm misunderstanding something. Dana, thoughts?
Yeah, I think that comment was made a lot earlier in the chat, and I guess one of the ways that I interpreted it was having to do with, the dysregulation, emotional
Sure, that makes sense. And maybe, yeah.
abuse. Yeah, where, your person, they're not trusting we're not trusting our reality, because when you're continually minimized and invalidated and told what's up is down and what's down is up, you don't know. You don't know how to keep yourself safe. You don't know who you can trust. You don't feel like you can trust yourself. It's this perpetual self-doubt.
Yeah.
You're wondering if you're losing your mind. You're wondering if you're paranoid. You wonder if you just don't know what's going on with you. And um, it just makes it that much worse when you come across other people, friends, family, mental health professionals that don't understand what you
Hmm.
went through. And so, yeah, people tend to be very reactive after abuse because they're trying to kind of find that new normal. They're trying to find stability, emotional stability in their life, but it's really difficult when you feel really unstable because of everything that happened to you. And you don't know how to get yourself to a point that's stable because you don't trust yourself and you don't trust other people.
Hmm.
And you don't trust your
Absolutely.
perception of reality and your judgment and all of that.
And
So,
that is fair. And like I said, I was reading it out of context. I wasn't sure, and I'm still not sure. but I think you're making valid points, and I hope that's what that was about. Because I think I couldn't. I must have misunderstood it. Okay. And do you have a comment or a question for us?
let's see. I'm still looking through the
Well,
chat.
Lauren said something that's actually right along with your what you just said. She said, "Yeah, not only mental abuse, physical abuse, everything, they make you doubt your own reality and wonder, was it all me? Is it all my fault?" And that is absolutely the truth. I really that's how I that's how I discovered it in the first place because I was assuming that it was in fact all my fault. And, and I did a lot of digging to find out like what and then I found out maybe it wasn't me. At least the abuse part wasn't my fault. You know,
Mhm.
we all have responsibility at varying points. You know, we tolerate certain things we shouldn't, but a lot of times when we're raised in a situation like that, we don't even know that we shouldn't tolerate some of those things. So it takes personal growth and exploration and learning to respect yourself. And as Dana said, boundaries, all of that is, but but we don't always know that we're supposed to do that when we're not taught that. So,
Yeah, and most people aren't taught any of this. If anything, it's the exact opposite. It's, oh, you need to be nice to everybody and forgive and forget. And, um, who are you to judge? And all kinds of platitudes are thrown out there and passed around as really solid advice.
yeah.
And it's, it's not given within context.
Hmm.
And that's kind of stuff can become very dangerous. Like, oh, well, all mothers love their children, or all parents love their children, or
Yeah.
you know
Even being told, I love you. This is why I'm doing this. As
yes,
being, yeah, I had that
they did the
as,
best they could.
hmm,
um they just wanted what's right for you.
right.
Things like this can be so minimizing and invalidating, and again, normal decent people tend to, they just don't realize, no, actually, there's a lot of parents don't care at all about their children.
Yeah. It's hard
And
to even fathom it.
it is. It
Yeah.
really, really is. And yeah.
Yeah. And yeah. I will agree with that. Hello, Piper, by the way. Um, yeah, Crystal says so true. Regardless of the proper name, they are all toxic individuals, or they are still toxic individuals. That's the truth. Yeah. Um, I'm looking. If you guys have questions, pop them in the chat because we are here to answer y'all's questions too. Okay, here we go. Um, M. Mars says, even Shakespeare knew about narcissism in King Lear, he points out. Why isn't the psychology field more advanced about it? I really think, personally, and I'm just going to share my opinion, then I'll let Dana share hers, which on this particular topic is probably a little more informed than mine. But from what I understand, I think it's about the fact that there's so much to cover. I mean, and there's so much to cover. And I get that. I'm not blaming anyone. I'm just saying, if I were in that position, I would personally do some research before I tell somebody, yeah, you're wrong. But anyway, Dana, thoughts?
Yeah. I I honestly don't know why to me, it's the core. It's such a fundamental thing to look for when we talk about dysfunction in family. When people go into counseling, there's dysfunction afoot.
Hmm.
So it's really important that everybody involved in there needs to have an idea of what is functional behavior and what is dysfunctional behavior.
Hmm.
And um narcissism, even if it's not full out NPD, but if it's narcissism to the point where it's this destructive degree of self-absorption, where other family members aren't getting, other people are not getting their needs met, and it's just a
Hmm.
one-way street and all of that, it's it's still damaging. So that's kind of my issue with a lot of therapy is, it's just, a person has to be able to find their own North Star and understand, like, what's nourishing for them and what's toxic for them, and um, what healthy boundaries are,
Right.
and what's appropriate and what's inappropriate, and how they can tell, and
Hmm.
just kind of just the basics of
Yeah,
that. And I don't know if even a lot of mental health professionals know that, to be,
I think. Yeah,
honest.
I think you
So,
might be right. I want to say this. First, I want to read Triple Gemini's comment, which is toxic is toxic. If someone isn't treating you right, narcissist or not, you shouldn't stay. I agree 100%. But I want to say this. I believe, and tell me if you think I'm wrong, Dana. I believe that in some cases, someone might be toxic for person A, but not for person B. Okay. For example, I have one client who is into a certain lifestyle that I won't mention here, and she doesn't mind a person who's a little bit controlling of her, and she kind of likes it as long as they're within her boundaries of that, and call it what it is, whatever. But over here, person B might feel like, I don't want to be controlled and I don't want you to try to control me. And so that makes this person toxic for person B and not for person A. You know what I'm saying? So
mhm.
I think there's that. The point I'm making, Dana, is exactly what you were just saying. What's toxic for you personally? Right? Do you want someone to tell you what to do or not? In that case, you know what I mean? I do not. Don't try. You know
Yeah,
what I mean? But it just depends on the person. And this one particular client of mine, like, that makes her happy. And not abusive, but they play this game. It's a game they play. It's their thing, whatever. But it's good for her. It makes her happy. And over here, most people are like, what in the world? It's okay. You know what I mean? So I think that's important. What
Well,
are your thoughts?
I think if we're talking about like, you know, BDSM kind of dynamic where you have, a dominant and submissive type partner, and
Right.
whether that's just in the bedroom every now and again, or if it's a 24/7 lifestyle, really, I mean, at the core of that, it's even within BDSM community, it's, safe, sane, consensual.
Yes,
And
exactly. They have a contract
yeah,
apparently. Anyway.
well,
Yeah.
yeah, a lot of them do. So like the big part is consensual. So if you're like, hey, this is what I'm into, um,
Right.
and the other person, you've here's my whole thing. You've got to be really, you've got to have a really healthy relationship to act that messed up.
I mean, I agree. I'm not saying it's my
I,
thing, but
I'm not either, but you've
it's
got to have respect and dignity and understanding of boundaries
yeah.
and solid communication in
Or
order to push those lines, is what
I,
I'm saying.
I fully agree. And it becomes toxic if you don't, I think. Um,
Very quickly. And there's a
yeah.
lot of people in that community that are actually in abusive relationships, and don't realize it because they think, oh, well, I wanted to be the submissive partner. So I must just do whatever the dominant partner tells me. But then you have the dominant partner who might be very into humiliation and degradation, whereas the submissive partner is not into that at all, but they might be more into, I don't know, other being tied up or spanked or whatever. But sorry, it's probably gonna get demonetized. But
It's okay.
there's a disconnect there.
Yeah.
So if the dominant partner is continuing to push their views on the submissive partner, that's when it becomes abusive. So in
Yeah.
these types of dynamics, it's the submissive partner that has all of the control, ironically, because they're the one with the safe word. They're the one that says, I'm okay with this, I'm not
Yeah.
okay with that. If the
That's right.
dominant partner keeps pushing, that's abuse.
Yes.
So
I agree 100%. And that's how you know the difference. It's like my and I'm not going to go into her whole story or anything like that, but my client previously was with a bad one and now she's got a good one. That's what I'm going to say.
yeah,
Uh, so and the contract for her was the thing that was most important because it helped. They literally wrote a contract, or they're writing a contract, and that sets the rules, and the rules are in stone for both. Anyway, you're right. The submissive in some ways has all the power there because they are allowing. It's a certain. We don't need to go into all this right now. My point is, it can be done in a healthy way, depending on what your version of healthy is.
yeah,
But my original point being, that person would be toxic for me no matter what if they tried to have any sort of control over me and the way I think, feel, say, or do. Whereas for this person, they had a deal and it worked out to where it was good for her. You know what I'm saying? That's all I'm saying. Okay.
yeah, yeah,
We got
yeah. To kind of to each his own. I have my own opinions about it, but it concerns me that 50 Shades of Grey, I think, really did a tremendous amount of damage.
I
Uh,
agree.
but there's a lot of people running around out there that are just being abusive and being abused and don't realize it because they think that they just have this really skewed idea of what these dynamics are about.
Right. My
So,
feeling is exactly, I may or may not agree with something, and I may think that that person is doing that because of a psychological problem. However, and I'm not talking about my client, I'm talking in general about that type of situation. But exactly what you said. I try not to judge people as long as it's exactly safe, sane, and consensual. Those things to me are important, and if people are beyond that point, I can't help them. They need to go see somebody who's more yeah. But anyway, I agree. I don't think that it's necessarily, quote unquote normal, but I would never judge anyone for making it, a choice, or for having something they enjoy, as long as it's
mhm,
done in a consensual, safe situation. Yeah.
yeah.
Um, I am interested in your thoughts on that, but I don't know if we want to go too deep into it at the moment. It's up to you.
Yeah, no, I think that's a whole another conversation.
Okay, I think so too. All right, we'll
Yeah.
do that on a day we're prepared to be demonetized.
Right. Right.
you know. All right, let's see here. Um, do we have any more questions? We got
Yeah,
about. Go ahead.
I've got let's wrap it up with this question because this is a
Sounds
big
good.
one. Um, Diorlovic, I probably did not say that correctly, I apologize, asks, do you know if narcissism can be treated or minimized with proper therapies, technically?
Okay, this is what I think. Personal opinion. I believe in my heart of hearts that if you could get a narcissist who is truly willing to go in there and work the therapy and who was willing to dig deep and discover their core wounds, heal their core wounds, work through all of their issues, maybe. But have I ever seen it? No. That's all. Go ahead.
Yeah. Uh, I think there's just so many challenges with that because narcissism and defensiveness go hand in hand.
Mhm.
And when anybody goes into therapy, even if you're like, yeah, I really want to be here, and you're opening, it's a high degree of safety and trust has to be established in order for a person to be vulnerable. And that's really difficult for somebody that's more on that narcissistic side of the spectrum to do because their defenses are always up
Yeah.
because they're very insecure and it's, you know, and they don't often real there's so much that's going on with them subconsciously.
Yeah.
So right off the bat, it's next to impossible for any type of rapport to be established, for any actual work to be done.
Mhm.
Um, and most people have this idea of therapy. They give it three, and probably life coaching as well. They give it 3 sessions. And if they don't see massive change, they're done. And so
Right.
they're quick to be like, oh, well, this doesn't work.
Yes.
So
That's
most
right.
people don't give it the time it really needs for change to happen. And then when you're being open about things that are vulnerable, uh, most people get their it's fear, it's anxiety inducing, like what is this person going to think of me, and um so there's just all of this defensiveness and fear that comes up, which prevents a lot of that deep dive work from being done. Here's my thing. If that person, I wouldn't hold my breath for anybody to change, um especially if they've ever demonstrated dangerous or destructive behavior. To me, it doesn't even matter if they're in therapy. That's great. I wish them well, but the risk is too high to have them back in your home. It's sort of like, well, can child molesters change? Well, maybe, probably not.
Is it worth the risk?
Is it
Yeah.
worth the risk? I sure as hell wouldn't ever let them around my child ever again.
Same.
I don't care if they were cleared by, 10 PhDs that said, oh, yes, they've absolutely changed. Just like I'm not going to welcome in a person that's murdered somebody or, that they've already shown that they're dangerous and destructive. So can they change? Maybe. Am I going to stick around to find out? No.
100%. Yeah. I exactly what I said. I stand by. I think it's clinically possible, but I've never seen it happen. I will tell you this: there's a doctor, Dr. David Hawkins, claims he can change narcissists. Claims he has. When I did a video about him at the request, it was a couple years back, at the request of one of you guys who was around 2 years ago. Um, that that several of his clients' wives, because he only treated men, reached out to me and said, he's not treating them. He's just teaching them behavior modification and they still mess up all the time. And they need to keep going to him forever. And I say this every time I tell this story, but Richard Grannon said, yeah, that's convenient for somebody who bills by the hour. And I thought, right. Okay. So that's what I know about that. All
Yeah.
right. Anything else? Last final thoughts, Dana?
Yeah. I really feel just in general, because here's a real quick question from Heidi who asks, do you feel that all people need therapy? Uh, we're at a place in time, I guess you could say, that I really feel we're just beginning with
Mm,
mental health, understanding mental and emotional health,
mhm.
and with what works for different diagnoses, what are actual diagnoses. These things change all the time, and um, so it's we're just at the beginning stages of all of this. So this is very much a learning curve for, I think, everybody involved. And do I think everybody needs therapy? I think if it's quality therapy, we could all benefit from it. But no, I don't think all people need therapy. I think a lot of times listening to videos and personal growth stuff is, I think, by and large, always the vast majority of the time, I should say,
Mm,
impactful. It's helpful, but one-on-one therapy, no, not necessarily.
right.
Just depending on what a person's been through or hasn't been through, but that's not the same as teaching kind of emotional health skills like coping and all of that, which is different from like actual, therapy, I guess you could say.
Yeah. And I think everybody can benefit differently based on how they perceive, like what do they understand already. Maybe you just said that, but I think, even as a coach, I've helped people with gaining coping skills that they just didn't think of, or maybe they knew but they didn't put it in place here or there. You know what I mean? So I think it just depends on. Well, you made the point. It was completely valid. I'll just leave it at that. Valid point. Um, okay. Anything else you want to hit him with today, Dana?
Yeah, actually, just real quick about because Heidi was saying, she says, thanks for your response. When it comes to therapy, it definitely does help if you have an idea of why. Same with life coaching. When you go to when you're trying to make any type of change, I guess in general, it's really helpful for everybody involved to have an idea of the outcome that you're seeking. So if you're fresh out of something traumatic, like I was talking about at the beginning of the live stream, where you're like, you know what, I just need to sit here and be heard.
Hmm.
I just need to tell my story. That's okay. But then letting the life coach or the therapist know, I'm really grieving right now and I feel like I just need to be heard. The more clarity you have about what you're needing and you can express that to them, the better they can work with you.
Valid point. Yeah.
So that's when therapy can be helpful because it really is it's a two-way street. It's developing that relationship and that rapport. So when you go in with somebody, it's not that they're the expert, and that you're just there to be treated. It
Hmm.
requires a relationship, and it helps if you're able to express your wants and needs and concerns and frustrations and everything else, and then working together as a team to be like, okay, well, what's working, what's not working, and why? And let's just keep moving forward, but let me know if this is helping or not, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Penny Lilly, yes, I do think that it's possible to get complex post-traumatic stress disorder from being in a long-term relationship with a narcissist. I've talked about it in many videos, so has Dana in the past. You guys can check that out. Really quick, I just want to pick up this question from E-Rock because I want to validate you, my friend. E-Rock said, I have a question regarding when you think deal breakers are with therapists. For example, I've been seeing one probably since this past May. Never missed a session, always called 24 hours in advance. Recently, missed one session where it was less than 24 hours in advance. They're charging me $80 for the session, which I don't have right now. And now the therapist is ghosting E-Rock. So I would say this to you. I don't think that's fair. I think maybe if you call in and you talk to them, maybe they'll work with you on this, especially if they were someone who was helping you. Maybe they'll let you make a payment plan or something like that. I think your point is valid. But at the same time, I also know that, I mean, it's a far smaller charge when someone when someone doesn't show up for a coaching call. But if they just tell us in advance, I always waive that fee personally. But it's different. It's coaching. It's not therapy. So yes, your point is valid, and I would suggest that you either email the therapist or try to call and speak to the therapist and say, look, I'm really sorry this happened. Please note that I've never done this before and I promise I won't do it again. Could we break this up into payments or something so I can continue my treatment? Just want to throw that out there. Dana, thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, most places, physical health or emotional health places will say, this is our cancellation policy,
Mhm.
and these are the fees that are involved, and that's something that they should have gone over with you and ideally had you sign.
Yeah.
If that was their policy, hey, we need 24 hours notice because they only get paid,
If you show up.
if you show up.
Yeah.
So, um,
And then your spot it could have been taken by someone
right.
else. That's my whole thing. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I guess I would see if, is it the policy? Did you know about this policy? If you didn't know about the policy, then that's a different story. But if you knew about it, you still missed the appointment. Well, then you owe the money. It sucks. A lot of places are not flexible like that. I've had that happen to me before too. I
Mhm.
get it. But I
Yep.
would call and see if you can make a payment plan. But it's not cool that they're ghosting you. I would hope that they would
I agree with
at
that.
least explain kind of what's going on.
An additional comment from E-Rock on this. I'm also on Medicaid. I don't recall them ever telling me that. Also, I didn't hear from her for a month because of her schedule, you know. I said, "Oh, it's okay. Okay, listen, I'm not trying to like cause trouble for your therapist. Don't tell her I'm the one that told you this. Call Medicaid, please." Medicaid does not allow providers to bill you directly. So you might have a loophole there. I know this because I used to work in healthcare back in the day. So call Medicaid, talk to someone there and ask them, is she allowed to bill me this? If she is, then you got to deal with it. But if she isn't, okay. And also, I don't know if you can find another therapist that can help you if she's actually ghosting you, which I think is incredibly toxic for, she has an office staff, right? They could at least
Well,
talk to you.
and that's not only unprofessional, it's unethical. And
Yeah.
that's its own level of concern because she
Yeah.
has an ethical obligation um,
Yeah.
to clients to not abandon or desert them. So I totally understand where you're coming from when you're like, wow, okay, I've been over backwards, I've been flexible, and this person's, not returning my phone calls. I'm trying to make an appointment for a month. I'm the one being flexible, and then like the one time that I can't make it, now I'm the one that's paying.
Right.
I can see your frustration there,
Mhm.
but
Yeah.
um,
And
if
I really would call
yeah.
Medicaid. Yeah.
if
Go
there's
ahead,
if
Dane.
there's not that rapport there where you're like, um, this person's they're just not really reliable. And for whatever reason, maybe this person has a huge client load, maybe they're overwhelmed. Who knows? Who knows? It doesn't matter. Frankly, it doesn't matter. But if they can't give you that stability that you need with scheduling appointments and they're canceling on you or just not returning your phone calls, then just that alone sounds like you need to find somebody else.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
yeah.
and as Jen notes here, yes, what I said was true about they can't bill you directly, and also she said, um, Medicaid can find you another therapist, which is entirely true. If you do get another therapist, make sure that you ask all the questions ahead of time so you're not getting someone who's going to mess with your head. Make sure they're on the same page. But outside of that, yeah, um, I would agree with all of that. Okay, um, final thoughts, Dana. We've said those several times. Are we good?
Yeah, well, and just to follow up real quick, Rock says, "Well, do you think I should address this in my email in a non-emotional way?" Yeah, I would, because that's part of your frustration, right? That
Yeah.
you've been very accommodating
Mhm.
for this person's schedule who hasn't been returning calls, who hasn't been able to meet with you for over a month, who doing all these things.
Mhm.
Yes, you weren't aware that this was their policy, that you were
Right.
charged for it, and you're just feeling how you feel. You're feeling confused and upset
Mhm.
and um,
Yeah.
thinking
And
that you need to change therapists.
And I suspect that if Medicaid stops making that therapist an approved therapist, he or she may not get as much business as they currently have. So perhaps you might mention carefully that possibility. Okay. um, Dana, anything else?
Yeah, I know. I think that's it.
Okay.
Yeah.
We love you all.
Yes,
Okay.
we do.
Yes, I am going to wrap it up. So, as you guys know, subscribe to this channel, hit the bell notification to be notified when we go live. Subscribe to Dana's channel, Thrive After Abuse, right here on YouTube to be notified when we go live over there. And when she goes live, Dana goes live every Wednesday, also, right? What time?
Yes, 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.
Okay. And when is your book club stream that you do? Are you doing that right now or no?
I no, not yet. I just
Okay.
just got back home, so I'm
Coming back. Okay. All right. And right now, Lise is about to go live in about 8 minutes over on the Queen Bee Narcissistic Abuse Recovery channel. I think I'll just paste a link for you. Oh, I don't think that's the right link. Okay, well, just go over there in 8 minutes if you want. I can't. I just tried to paste a link, but it was the wrong link. And as always, thank you so much for being a part of my day and a part of my life. And I will see you guys soon. We will all see you soon. Oh yeah, Dana's also at thriveafterabuse.com, Thrive After Abuse on Twitter, Facebook, all the places. And she has that Thrive After Abuse support group over there on Twitter. I mean, on Facebook as well. So make sure you check all that out. All right, everybody. Dana, see you
okay.
soon.
See you
All right.
guys next week.
Have a lovely week, everybody. We'll see you on
Okay.
Dana's channel next week. All right.
Bye.
Bye.